What is the most evil thing your company did/is doing? Don't work there now, but in college, the restaurant I worked at sold soup in $3 cups and $5 bowls. Cups were narrow and deep, bowls were big and shallow, so they looked bigger when full. But they were both 8 ounces. I don't work there anymore, quit after 2 weeks, but I worked for a place that sold prescription savings plans to elderly people. They were pure evil. Our job was to try to get elderly people to cancel their insurance and switch to our plan, which was a very shitty plan that would end up costing them a lot more. And of course, once they switched and found out how shitty we were, it is very hard for an elderly person to get back on their regular insurance. I had elderly people calling me up in tears. I just couldn't handle it. I have never wanted to set a building on fire more than when I worked there. My boss buys back our used product for $300 or less, sells it as refurbished for $3,000 but doesn't actually refurbish anything. Purposely assign shitty jobs to a person they can't fire, so they want to get him to leave instead. I work in retail, which is stressful when you're understaffed. The store manager combined 3 departments to one manager and he had a heart attack in our dairy cooler. Recently we have been assigned more work areas than a human can possibly do without help of drugs. Some people were getting an estimated 21 hours of freight in a night. One lady died yesterday from the stress. Her blood sugar was going crazy from the stress, she stopped taking her meals and breaks trying to get her work done, and fell into a coma. Our store is covering both accidents up. I got second-degree burns to 10 to 15% of my body when a co-worker wasn't using a machine properly and left me to find out his errors. Management didn't fire him. Management lied to upper management about the incident to protect themselves. Management also incorrectly filled out the WorkSafe forms to get away with what is mentioned above. The best thing though? I can't even sue because Australia's workplace laws gloss over burn injuries that don't leave you charred black. The 2 major chain pharmacies in the US force pharmacists to produce and verify prescriptions based on time limits. If I have to look up the dosage on your grandmother's heart medicine or counsel patients on important points, other orders will turn red, my pharmacy loses points and corporate bosses visit to discuss workflow and penalize us. In the end, patient safety is tossed aside for the sake of corporate stockholders. What would you say if your physician had only 15 seconds to review your chart or he was penalized? I still don't know how this is legal. I worked for the ALS Association where I lived. The executive director used the organization credit card as her personal bank account, stole laptops, rarely showed up for work, and when I reported it to the board, they quietly swept it all under the rug. I also worked for an organization that had a public inebriate program. Our manager told us $75,000 was missing from our general fund, but that they weren't going to investigate it but that we should pray about it. I reported it to the local police department, who in turn handed it over to the prosecuting attorney. Both of these were nonprofits. I hate nonprofit organizations and have seen nothing but corruption. Maybe not evil but at least unethical. The boss makes millions of dollars every year and funnels that back to Israel while his employees help each other sign up for food stamps because their wages are so low. In New York City, a starting salary of $25 to $30K is laughable for an auditing and consulting position. It's all young college kids who stay for 6 months to a year and leave as soon as they can find another job. It's disgusting. He's skiing in Italy right now while the entire office is working until 6 p.m. tonight. It's fucking Christmas Eve. I used to work doing events with Hilton hotels and they had no respect for staff. In the past, the deal was that we never got the length of breaks required by law. The organization of the events made real breaks difficult, but in exchange our shorter breaks would be paid and we got food provided. Then after one Christmas, with everybody working crazy hours for the last month, missing Christmas Eve, Christmas Day and New Year's because of work, everybody noticed their paychecks were a little light. It turned out that in November they had decided to change the break policy so that we had to take full breaks with every shift and that we would no longer be paid for them. Except they forgot to tell us this at the busiest time of the year, so nobody was taking full breaks. If you tried, you'd only get grief from the management anyway, so everyone lost 30 minutes pay per 6 hours work. And when we were all on minimum wage and losing our holidays for that horrible place, it was a massive slap in the face. The day I quit because I was starting a PhD was a very good one. I worked for a ticket broker for a while. Ticket brokers basically buy tickets to events in hopes the event/section will sell out and people will be forced to buy their marked up tickets. We were also part of a broker network. If one broker had tickets they were selling at $80, we would list them on our site at $100. If someone bought it from us, we would buy the tickets from the other broker and have them ship them to the customer. There were also these dummy websites in the network. They would make themselves look like the box office of a certain venue, and list tickets available within a certain range at a 30% markup to face value. When someone placed an order from one of these sites, we would go to Ticketmaster, buy the tickets at face value, then send them electronically to the customer. One time when I worked by myself on a weekend, I straight up told the customer, who hadn't bought anything from us yet, that the tickets were still available from the box office and sent her a link to the correct website. It was one of the shadier things I've done as a liberal arts grad trying to get a job. Daycare I used to work for was feeding children cold food, beans and weenies at least twice a week, mopping floors with Windex, lack of bleach, constantly running out of toilet paper/paper towels. Most employees are severely uneducated. The owner's kids have $100 backpacks, and private chair lessons. I think the daycare tuition money is clearly not being used at the daycare. I work for some truly reprehensible people, 2 guys. They own the business. We have to hire a lot of temp workers as needed, but most of them don't speak much English. These guys are always saying awful things to them, telling them that they are stupid and whatnot. One woman occasionally wears a shirt that says "This is America, speak English or get out." My boss screamed at her, "Do you even know what your shirt says? Dummy." Then he laughed and walked away. Another guy here is Puerto Rican and our boss told him "Your mama is from the jungle." I had to physically restrain him from hitting the boss. Recently, one of them was talking about how they couldn't afford to give anyone a raise or a bonus, and then an hour later was telling me about the new boat and $3,000 navigation system he just bought. I work for inconsiderate jerks. When I was a nuclear technician in the Navy, we dumped trash in the water pretty much continuously. Also, the Navy claims that there has never been a nuclear accident in this history of nuclear propulsion. This is misleading because they have a specific definition of nuclear accident. What they're actually saying is that uranium from a nuclear reactor has never been released into the atmosphere/environment. They actually leak radioactive water all over the place, but don't call that a nuclear accident. I worked as a maintenance man at a realty company. They had a policy where they don't pay you for overtime. They let you bank your overtime hours toward time off with pay. Trouble was, there was so much work to be done every single day, they could never approve my days off because I was always behind. It was basically a 4-person job I was doing by myself. The property was huge. After working 12-hour days for weeks at a time, and then coming back at night and weekends to deal with on-call emergencies, I finally looked up the labor laws in my city. Turns out, anything more than 20 banked hours of overtime has to be paid out in cash, by law. I was up to 60. They still wouldn't give me the overtime pay. They just forced me to take the days off, and I just got further behind. Sure, it was nice to have a whole month of long weekends, but I also could have really used that cash. It would have been over $1,000 in overtime pay. I'm pretty sure they knew damn well this was the labor law in our city. How could they not? But they would have worked me like a slave forever if I hadn't looked it up on my own. And this from a company that made over $2 million a year just on the one property they owned, and they own dozens. We fly and house big executives from overseas. We pay for things like houses, horses, and college education for their children. Place government officials in fancy hotels with thousands of dollars in room service and official company business. Then we take all of those expenses and charge them to the customers. Didn't believe it at first until the higher-ups had a meeting with a government agency who they somehow convinced all of this was okay because it's only pennies on the customer's bills. Which is a blatant lie. The attorney I worked for fired a young attorney through a text message. She was brand new and still learning, but he was throwing projects and cases on her without any sort of training and would make her cry almost every day. He was an asshole with a bad reputation across the state, and practiced for 35 years with disciplinary actions and malpractice suits against him, but every young associate that worked for him left because they couldn't stand him. It was like working for Michael Scott, except it wasn't funny, it was infuriating. I couldn't take it anymore, so I left to work for the state, and I quit via text message by saying, "Thank you for the opportunity, I wish you the best on your future endeavors." Apparently, while I was working there, so many other attorneys and judges kept their mouths shut and didn't say anything bad about the guy out of respect for me, but as soon as I quit, everyone came out of the woodwork to tell me about his bad reputation, and that no one made money with him or stayed that long with him. Much happier now. Last company I worked for called me 2 days before my wedding and told me if I didn't come into work on my wedding day, I'd be done. I had put in for time off and had it approved 6 months in advance. It was scheduled as time off and everything. Luckily I was in interviews with a different company. When I told them what just happened, I got the job. Emailed my former supervisor and told her I wasn't coming back. I fucking hated that place. It was a tech support call center. If your supervisor wasn't yelling at you, a customer was.